Right now, the United States owes more money than at almost any point in its history. The national debt has blown past $38 trillion, and it's still climbing by tens of thousands of dollars every single second. To put that in perspective, that's more than $100,000 of debt for every person in the country. So how did we get here? Why does it suddenly matter so much more than it used to? And what does it mean for you? Here's the number that changed everything. In 2026, for the first time in modern history, the U.S. government will spend more on interest payments on its debt than on its entire military. Think about that. We are now paying more just to service old borrowing, roughly $1 trillion a year, than we spend defending the country. Interest is no longer a footnote in the budget. It has become one of the single largest expenses the government has. So how do we even get here? This wasn't one bad decision. It was decades of them from both parties. The government has spent more than it collected in taxes almost every single year for over 20 years. Then came the shocks, the 2008 financial crisis, and then a pandemic that added trillions in emergency spending in just 2 years. Layer in tax cuts that were never fully paid for, and it compounds. Washington didn't borrow $38 trillion overnight. It borrowed it one emergency at a time. And $1 trillion a year in interest is not normal. As a share of the economy, interest costs have climbed to about 3.3% of GDP, higher than at any point since the early 1990s and closing in on a record set just after World War II. What changed? Two things collided. The government borrowed enormous amounts, and then interest rates jumped. Suddenly, all of that debt got a lot more expensive to carry. Step back and look at the bigger trend. Federal debt is now worth almost as much as everything the entire U.S. economy produces in a year, a debt-to-GDP ratio near 100%. The last time America was here was the 1940s, paying for a world war. The difference is, back then the debt fell sharply once the war ended. This time, there is no war ending. The borrowing is baked into the budget itself. This is where it gets dangerous, something economists call the debt spiral. It works like this. High debt means high interest payments. To pay that interest, the government borrows even more. That extra borrowing adds to the debt, which means even more interest next year. Higher rates make every turn of the wheel worse. It's like paying the minimum on a credit card while the balance keeps growing. The math doesn't break suddenly. It just quietly compounds against you. So who actually owns all this debt? It's split a few ways. A large chunk is held by the American public, pension funds, banks, and everyday investors holding treasury bonds. The Federal Reserve owns a slice, and foreign governments hold trillions more, with Japan and China among the biggest lenders. That last part matters. When a country owes this much to others, the world's willingness to keep buying its debt becomes a real source of both leverage and risk. And here is the part that makes the next few years so fragile. Much of this debt is short-term. It has to be refinanced constantly at whatever interest rate the market demands that day. So when rates rise, the pain doesn't wait decades to show up. It hits within months. By some estimates, every single percentage point increase in rates eventually adds hundreds of billions of dollars a year to the interest bill. That is why the Federal Reserve and the debt are now tied at the hip. The cost of money is the cost of the debt. Now, why should any of this matter to you? Because the bill doesn't stay in Washington. Heavy government borrowing competes with everyone else for money, which can keep interest rates and your mortgage higher for longer. $1 trillion going to interest is $1 trillion not going to anything else, which means pressure for higher taxes or less spending down the road. And if confidence ever cracks, the classic escape valve is inflation, quietly eroding the value of the dollars in your pocket. But let's be fair, because the doom story has limits. The United States is not a household. It borrows in its own currency, the dollar, which is still the backbone of the global financial system. It can roll over its debt in ways you and I never could, and demand for U.S. Treasuries remains enormous. So this is not about America going bankrupt tomorrow. It's about a slow tightening, less flexibility, higher costs, and fewer options when the next crisis hits. So how do you actually watch this? And to be clear, this is a framework, not financial advice. Keep an eye on 3 things. 1. Interest rates, because they decide how fast the spiral turns. 2. The deficit, is the government adding to the problem each year or slowing down? And 3. Demand at Treasury auctions. If the world starts demanding higher yields to lend, that is the early warning sign. The debt itself is old news. The trajectory is the real story. Here's the bottom line. $38 trillion is a number so big it stops meaning anything. So forget the number and watch the direction. For the first time, interest costs more than defense. Debt rivals the entire economy, and rates decide how fast it all compounds. It probably won't end in a dramatic crash. It's more likely a slow squeeze on everything the government and eventually you can afford. Now, everything here is for education and information only. It is not financial advice, and nothing here is a recommendation to buy or sell anything. Figures are estimates that may be out of date, so always do your own research. If this made a $1 trillion problem, finally click subscribe to Innovana and tell me, should Washington cut spending or try to grow its way out? I'll see you in the next one.